Hey Yogi, Niecia here. Let's explore downward facing dog, shall we? Now, I always like to invite props into my practice to support it, so I'm going to show you how to do downward facing dog traditionally and also using blocks to bring the ground a little bit closer to me. Before we get started, let's discuss some of the benefits of downward facing dog. They include stretching your hamstrings, calves, and glutes, while strengthening your arms, shoulders, and core. To get started in downward facing dog, I want you to think about making sure that you have a very wide base before you get started. So wide base with the hands, wide base with the feet. Starting with the hands first. Hands are going to be at least shoulder width distance apart, if not a little bit wider. And you want to spark your fingers, bringing space between the webbing of the fingers. The last thing you might consider doing is tick-tocking your hands out just a bit, which softens the pressure in your shoulders and gives you a little bit more space across the chest to move. With the feet, similar. The feet are going to be hip bones distance apart, but we're not going to tick-tock the feet out. The feet are going to be in line, toes are going to be pointing towards the top edge of your mat, ankles in line with the toes. To start, we will move into a downward facing, Niecia, to tabletop. In tabletop, again, fingers are spread really wide, so I have a wide base. Knees are under the hips, feet are in line with the ankles. And I'm going to go ahead and tick-tock my hands out just a bit because I already know that I like that in downward facing dog. From here, tuck the toes under and send the hips up and back. Now here, you may find that you need to adjust. I need to walk my feet out a little bit and I need to walk my hands up a little bit closer to the top edge of my mat. Think about making the shape of an upside down V. And you want equal weight in your hands and your feet, and you do that by pinning the belly button towards the spine and sending the hips closer to the sky. To do that, or to make it a little bit more accessible, you can bend your knees a little bit or a lot of bit. Take an inhale here, and exhale and settle into the pose. Awareness is coming to my shoulders right now, and I want to squeeze my shoulders up, back, and roll them down because you still want the shoulder blades to move away from one another. The shoulders are not crunching up by the ears, they're drawing away from the shoulders. Now let's try it with the blocks. Again, blocks bring the ground a little bit closer to you. And for me, I always start my practice using my blocks in downward facing dog. And as my body warms up and things start to loosen up, then I'll set the blocks aside. Starting in a tabletop position, my hands are on my blocks. Wrists are relatively under the shoulders. I like my blocks a little bit closer to the top edge of my mat to give myself a little bit more space. Same tuck of the toes and then send the hips up and back. Adjust your body once you get there. I squeeze my shoulders up by my ears, roll them back and down, and I feel the space between my shoulder blades go ahead and widen. I'm high on my tiptoes. What I want to do is lower my heels, but for me to do that right now, I need to bend my knees slightly. Big inhale here. And as I exhale, I press my chest and my belly closer to my thighs, even as I'm zipping up my core. To maintain equal weight between your hands and your feet, you do have to engage the core. So think about hugging everything in towards the midline, similar to what we do when we take boat pose. This is your downward facing dog. Okay, now another tip I'll offer is about the weight in your hands and how do you know if you're sinking weight into your wrists, which will eventually cause them to be sore, or if you are supporting yourself adequately through the hands, the feet, and the core. Okay, so the quickest way to know if you are sinking weight into your wrists is if you look at your wrists and you see creases. If you see creases, that means that you are not using your core or your legs. The majority of your weight is right here in the wrist. So to alleviate that, you bend your knees. Again, send the tailbone up and press the mat away from you, sending your chest and your belly closer to the thighs. Now, I take a look at my wrists and see that I have no creases. I can breathe and support myself at the same time. And I'm gonna let my ears rest between my upper arms. Gaze is back at my toes. Downward facing dog is often referred to as a resting pose. I say resting pose-ish. If you have built up the core strength and the arm strength and the shoulder strength to support yourself, it can be restful. But until you do that, it's work. Other options, so you can pop up into your down dog, and then once you feel fatigued or like you're getting ready to compromise the pose, all you need to do is come down to your tabletop. Maybe here you take a couple of cat-cows, or you just practice being in your tabletop, engaging, again, hugging everything in towards the midline. All right, that's all I have for you today. And I just want you to remember to meet yourself exactly where you're at in this moment. Have a good one.